I've heard a consistent drumbeat of concern from citizens who, often for the first time in their lives, now have reason to believe that we are failing to live up to one of our nation's most noble ideals, and that some of the achievements that define the civil rights movement now hang again in the balance.
He must be on to something, because today the conservative editorial page of the Wall Street Journal attacked the Attorney General, saying, quote, the latest of his election year moves that charge racial discrimination of one kind or another is worse than a shame that America's first black attorney general is using his considerable power to inflame racial antagonism. So let me get this right. To enforce the Voting Rights Act, to protect citizens from being taken off the voter rolls, being identified wrongly as non-citizens, is inflaming racial antagonism? That makes no sense. Joining me now is Elizabeth McNamara, president of the League of Women Voters. Her group's lawsuit led to the federal judges blocking that voter registration law yesterday, and Lee Rowland, counsel for the Brennan Center for Justice, who argued that Florida case. Thank you both for joining me.
Thank you for having us, Reverend.
Elizabeth, the League of Women Voters had been registering voters in Florida for 70 years. How important are these developments?
Well, we're very, very pleased to be able to, as we review the judge's decision, to be able to have our Florida affiliate, have our Florida League start registering voters again. This has been something that we have been doing, as you say, for a very, very long time. We have been doing it very successfully, and the registrars, our local registrars, really depend on us all across the country to be able to get places and at times and places where they can't go or don't have, or to be an extension of those folks. So we are extremely pleased that we're going to have an opportunity to do what we have been doing for the last 90 years all across the country, and making sure that every eligible voter has an equal opportunity to vote.
Lee, you helped argue this case. Why was this case so important, and what is the ramifications of the judge's decision?
In a nutshell, the decision yesterday strikes down the harshest provisions of this law that the Florida legislature passed to crack down on voting and voter registration. Notably, it gets rid of an extremely burdensome 48-hour requirement that was virtually impossible for reasonable groups to meet without risking high fines and damage to their reputation, which is something groups like the League of Women Voters care deeply about. So this is a hugely important decision because it got rid of the worst parts of that law. Hopefully, this will enable groups to get back out there on the ground registering voters. And I think it's important not only for the voters of Florida and for groups like the League, our clients, but really for democracy. We've seen a wave of suppressive laws in state legislatures, and if this decision yesterday means anything, it means that laws that are passed with the purpose to crack down on voting are illegitimate, they're unlawful, and they need to be blocked. And this federal court did that.
Well, you know, this show and myself personally have been very much concerned about this. When you deal with the Florida and the Department of Justice coming in, the Attorney General in that shot was speaking at the Conference of Black Churches.
Yes.
And many of those denomination leaders under Reverend W. Franklin Richardson pastor real people. I mean, forget politics, lawyers, activists, none of us. Yeah. Real people who may not be able to vote. Explain why this is so important that those roles not be purged in Florida and become a model for elsewhere.
Well, it's so important because we know what happens. We have a model for what happens in Florida, the 2000 debacle. Florida screwed up in 2000 by purging eligible voters off the rolls because they were uncautious. They used data that wasn't reliable. And unfortunately, we're seeing some evidence that that could be happening again. So for the DOJ to step in and say, no, you need to run this process by us is huge, because it sends an important signal to the state that federal court isn't going to buy these voter suppression laws. We've got another case in Washington, D.C. talking about the racial impacts of this new law. Right. And now the Department of Justice is saying, and you can't purge either. So really, Florida is moving forward with a kind of a trifecta of forces against it to stop it from creating another 2000-like debacle. And of course, we all want to avoid that.
Now, Elizabeth, for the League, nonpartisan, just registering voters for decades, trying no controversy, just trying to make sure that people can do their civic duty. Yet you ran the risk of being fined and of all kinds of things. And all you want to do is do what you've done for a couple of generations, 3 generations now. Register voters. People vote for who they want, but registered voters do their civil duty.
That's absolutely right. And we were very, very concerned in Florida that our volunteers were going to be in grave risk if they were to go out and do the things that they had been doing for a very, very long time. So we're extremely pleased that we're going to have the opportunity to get out there and make sure that every single voter has an opportunity to register and to vote. And we're not doing this, obviously, just in Florida. As Lee says, we have been seeing this all over the country, and the League has been active all over the country. Opposing these laws and making sure that we're not rolling back voting rights that we have worked so hard for over the last 50 years.
No doubt about it, and a lot of people suffered. That's why we marched on this year from Selma to Montgomery, and we're going to keep following this story. Lee Rowland from the Brennan Center, I always say Institute, Brennan Center, and Elizabeth McNamara from the League of Women Voters. Thank you both for your time tonight. Have a good weekend.
Thank you, Reverend.